All right, welcome Hilbert students. What we're going to do today is we're going to finish our lesson on the Civil War. And our learning targets today, we're going to continue to look at some of the major battles that were fought, the importance of these major battles, and we'll see who's going to win the Civil War today. So we left off with Gettysburg, 3-day battle in Pennsylvania. The Confederates lost a third of their army, and they'll never be as strong as they were the rest of the war before Gettysburg. And from that point on, the South, General Lee and the South, will be in defensive mode. They will let the fight come to them, and they will use a defensive strategy. But one of the parts of the Anaconda Plan, and there were 3 parts. The first was a blockade that was very effective, that the Union Navy, they blockaded the southern coast throughout the war. Second part was controlling the Mississippi River, and that's what they're going to try to do here, is they're going to sail to New Orleans in 1862. Whole bunch of Navy ships. They're going to sail, and they're going to take New Orleans without even firing a shot. So the Union Navy takes New Orleans, and that's part 1 of controlling the Mississippi. There would be other battles and other cities that the Union will eventually take over and control, but there will be one that will elude them, and that is Vicksburg, Mississippi. And unless they take Vicksburg, they will not be able to control the Mississippi River, which is part of the Anaconda Plan, because if they can control the Mississippi River, they can cut the Confederacy in half, because you got Texas and Arkansas on the other side of the Mississippi. So here's Vicksburg. Let me grab my pointer. And Vicksburg is located right here. The Mississippi River sort of comes this way, and Vicksburg is located on a cliff looking down on the Mississippi. So any Union Navy ships that sailed by Vicksburg, all they had to do was point their cannons at them and shoot them out of water. It's very dangerous. So what they decided to do was the Union attacked Vicksburg from the east, and they're going to lay siege to the city. All right? The siege of Vicksburg began on May 18th, and it ended on the 4th of July, 1863. July 4th, 1863, same day, right after Gettysburg. So 2 huge victories for the Union on the 4th of July in 1863. But what they did is they surrounded. They bombarded them every day from May 18th to July 4th. Residents are forced to eat dogs, horses, mules, rats, whatever they can get. Nothing's going in, nothing's coming out. The purpose of the siege is to keep doing it until Vicksburg surrenders, which they eventually did. And here's a picture. Shows how they dug caves into the mountainside, and that's where they were living to get away from the bombing that was coming on a daily basis by the Union Army and Navy. Right. So Vicksburg, very important victory for the Union. It allows them to complete part of the Anaconda Plan, which was controlling the Mississippi River. And since we're talking about the Mississippi River, we need to talk about a new type of ship that was built during the Civil War, ironclads, ironclad ships. What happened was when the South seceded, there was a boat that was needing repairs left in Virginia, and the Confederates took that boat and they covered it completely in iron. And then that boat went around and it was able to sink a number of Union ships, but you couldn't sink that one. The cannonballs just bounced off of it. So the Union had to come up with their own ironclad. And the Union had the Monitor, the South had the Merrimack, and the 2 ironclads met in battle, and probably the most boring sea battle in the history of sea battles, because for a couple hours they just bounced cannonballs off each other. When they realized nothing else was going to happen, they both just went away. They tried to make more ironclads throughout the war, but they didn't have as big of an influence as the South would have hoped. All right. And then this is a picture of an ironclad. Not very quick, but pretty darn indestructible. So now what we want to do is we want to talk about the role of African Americans in the Civil War. And at first, African Americans were not allowed to fight in the Civil War, but when they were allowed, we had a whole bunch. By the end of the Civil War, almost 200,000 African Americans are going to fight for the Union Army. And the most famous example of this would be the Massachusetts 54th. It was a regiment formed in Massachusetts. Its commander was Colonel Robert Shaw. Okay, the regiment was made up of African American soldiers. Their officers were white. And like I said, they were led by Colonel Shaw. At first, the black troops were not going to be put into battle, but then they eventually, we needed them, and the Massachusetts 54th got their fame in South Carolina, a place called Fort Wagner. And they offered to lead the attack on Fort Wagner, which you couldn't even capture it. It was located on the coast of the Atlantic Ocean, and to get near it, you had to run across an open stretch of beach. And then the Confederates put barriers in the way to slow you down. 54th, they did it. They attacked. Two of Frederick Douglass's sons were in the 54th, Massachusetts. They never did capture that, but because of the bravery of African Americans in that battle, and the attack on the Fort Wagner, more African American troops were put into battle. All right, and it was made into a movie. The movie's called Glory. Stars Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, Ferris Bueller. So good movie, good story. And they made this sculpture showing Colonel Shaw, and then the soldiers that you see, they used real members of the 54th Massachusetts to pose for this sculpture. It's found in Washington, D.C. So, war is dragging on, and so we have General Grant in control now of the Union, and he wants the war over. We have way more troops than the South, and General Grant knows this, and so he wants to conduct what is known as total war. In Virginia, General Philip Sheridan will be assigned there. In Georgia, it will be General William Tecumseh Sherman, and their instructions are very simple. Anything you don't want or need, destroy. Homes, barns, fields of crops, barn animals. If you can't use them, kill them, destroy them. They want to make sure that the enemy has nothing, and total war. So now you're involving the citizenry. All right, you're making life bad for them. And General Sheridan and General Sherman, they did a great job of destroying everything in their path. Sherman will go, he will capture the city of Atlanta, he will burn the city of Atlanta, and then he will march on to Savannah, Georgia, which is on the coast of the Atlantic Ocean. A 60-mile wide path of destruction. All right? Southerners, for years after the Civil War, hated Yankees because of total war. All right? Now, I mentioned General Grant knows he has all these troops at his command, knows that the Southerners do not. So his idea is that if we keep attacking and attacking and attacking, we're going to wear down the Southern Army, and we're going to deplete the Southern Army. Well, he does this, but he also does it at great cost because the Union is going to have a lot of casualties. And people back home are like, man, this guy's nuts. But it was effective. It did wear down the Confederates, all right? It was called the Overland Campaign, and there was a number of different battles involved in this. The Battle of the Wilderness, in which the two sides are fighting in the woods. The woods are so thick you can barely see through them, and they're fighting in this. The Battle of Cold Harbor is another battle of the Overland Campaign. And in this campaign, the Union, which has about 124,000 soldiers, is going to suffer 54,000 casualties. That's a little less than 50%. All right, a lot of casualties. But remember, they have the high numbers of soldiers. The Confederates, they have 60 to 65,000 soldiers, about 35,000 casualties, so more than half. So it was wearing down the South, and it had a great effect on the end of the war. It did speed up the end of the war, but people, they weren't so happy about these casualties. As a matter of fact, in some of these battles, soldiers were pinning their names on their uniforms so that if they were killed, their bodies could be identified and shipped back home to their loved ones. It's like the early form of dog tags. So the war is going to end with a siege. There was the siege of Vicksburg, and now we have the siege of Petersburg. One part of the Anaconda Plan was the Union blockade, or the Navy blockade. The second part was control the Mississippi River. Check, check. They did them both. The third part was capture Richmond, which they tried to do from the first battle of the war till the end. And the siege of Petersburg is part of that. Petersburg was a town that had like 5 easy for me to say, 5 railroad lines. So it was a supply hub to the Confederate Army. So the Union wanted to take control of it. So they laid siege to it, and this siege lasted from June 15th, 1864 to April 2nd, 1865, over 200 days. They laid siege to Petersburg. They cut the supply line so that the Confederates could not get supplies. And this was very effective because finally on April 9th, 1865, General Robert E. Lee will surrender to General Ulysses S. Grant. Right here is General Ulysses S. Grant of the Union. This is General Robert E. Lee of Virginia. And I have to go back to my friend Wilbur McLean. I talked to you a couple videos ago about Wilbur McLean. He lived in Manassas, Virginia, in this home right here, when the first battle of the Civil War was fought, the first battle of Bull Run, also called the First Battle of Manassas. After that battle, he said, man, we got to get out of here. We can't live in a war zone. So they moved to Appomattox Courthouse, in this house right here. Well, when it came time for General Lee to meet with General Grant to surrender, they met in Wilbur McLean's house. So people say that the war started in Wilbur McLean's backyard and it ended in his house, and those people are not lying. It's one of those cool stories from history. That's the Civil War in a nutshell. I mean, you could take a college class that would last a whole semester and you would learn a whole lot about the Civil War. But the Union wins, the Confederates lose, and now that the war is over, it's time to bring the southern states back into the Union. But how are you going to do that? All right. All right, well, thanks for joining me. And you know what's coming your way. You're going to have a quiz, you're going to have a study guide, you're going to have all that fun stuff. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me.